Her bicycle lay on its side near a quiet mountain road, one wheel half buried in dirt, the frame unbroken. No blood, no torn clothing, no signs of panic or impact, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't belong in nature, because someone should have been there. Someone was missing, and no one could explain how. It was Mother's Day weekend, May 2020, in Chaffee County, Colorado, a place defined by vast mountains, open stretches of land, and long, winding roads where traffic was rare and time seemed to move slower. People came here for peace, for distance, for the kind of quiet that allows you to hear your own thoughts. Crime was almost non-existent. Neighbors waved as you passed, doors remained unlocked, and a sense of trust suffused the community like sunlight. Disappearance in this kind of place felt almost impossible, a concept that existed only in stories and the occasional whispered rumor. That Sunday morning had seemed ordinary. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. The sky was a perfect, unbroken blue. It was a day for coffee on the porch, quiet reflection, and maybe a gentle ride on the roads that stretched endlessly into the mountains. Nothing suggested that by evening, one woman would vanish entirely, leaving behind questions that would haunt her town, her family, and investigators for years to come. Suzanne Morphew was 49 years old, a mother of 2 daughters, and a woman who inspired quiet admiration from those who knew her. Gentle, private, deeply devoted. Her friends described her as thoughtful, reflective, and resilient. Suzanne had already faced more than most could imagine. She had battled cancer multiple times, enduring years of treatment, recovery, and the slow rebuilding of a life that had been threatened again and again. Experiences like that reshape how someone sees the world, revealing what truly matters and what is inconsequential. Years earlier, she and her husband, Barry Morphew, had moved from Indiana to rural Colorado, seeking renewal and fresh air. A new beginning in a place where life was slower, simpler, and more peaceful. Barry ran a landscaping business, a man described as disciplined, hands-on, and methodical. From the outside, their marriage appeared solid, stable, and conventional, but appearances are notoriously deceptive. Later evidence would suggest a growing emotional distance, tension that simmered behind closed doors, and a sense that Suzanne felt increasingly trapped in a life that no longer fit her. On the morning of May 10th, Suzanne was home alone. Barry was reportedly away on a work project several hours distant, and their daughters were elsewhere, giving Suzanne the rare solitude she often cherished. At some point, she is believed to have gone out for a bike ride. It was a familiar routine, solitary rides along lightly traveled mountain roads, a space where she could think, breathe, and feel the rhythm of her own body moving against the landscape. As the day wore on, a growing unease began to settle over the community. Calls went unanswered, messages ignored. By the evening, concern became worry, and worry became alarm. A neighbor reported seeing Suzanne's bicycle, tipped on its side near a small embankment not far from her home. Her helmet lay nearby, as if she had simply set it down for a moment that never returned. Authorities were contacted immediately. Search teams arrived within hours, deploying dogs, helicopters, and volunteers to scour the rugged terrain. Forests, ravines, and open roads were combed meticulously, but the results were baffling. If Suzanne had crashed, there should have been signs: blood, disturbed vegetation, broken equipment. If she had been injured or attacked, something should have led searchers to her. But there was nothing, only silence. Only the faintly eerie image of a bicycle lying as though it were waiting for someone who would never return. Almost immediately, investigators realized the scene didn't make sense. The bicycle was unscathed, with no skid marks or signs of a fall. No torn clothing, no evidence of panic. If an animal had been involved, there should have been drag marks, tufts of fur, or blood. But there was none. The entire scene felt carefully staged, unnervingly precise. And then, the more troubling possibility emerged. What if Suzanne had never left home at all? There were no confirmed sightings of her riding that morning. The timeline rested entirely on assumptions, fragments of memory, and speculation. The bicycle, rather than providing clarity, became a cryptic artifact, its very presence raising questions rather than answering them. Investigators explored several possibilities, each more confounding than the last. First, the simplest explanation, an accident or random attack. The terrain was rugged and unforgiving, wildlife roamed freely, and a simple fall could have led to confusion or injury. But extensive searches found nothing, not a body, not clothing, not even the smallest trace of evidence. The lack of any findings made this explanation increasingly untenable. Second, a voluntary disappearance. Some began to wonder if Suzanne had chosen to leave everything behind, starting over somewhere far from Chaffee County. Digital messages later hinted at feelings of emotional isolation, frustration, and the desire for change. Yet leaving without a car, without money, without contacting her daughters on Mother's Day, it didn't fit. The careful, loving mother who had battled disease and built her life anew wouldn't vanish without planning or preparation. The third possibility was far closer to home. Investigators scrutinized Barry Morphew, examining his movements, phone data, and statements before and after Suzanne disappeared. Charges were eventually filed, accusing him of murder, but the case faltered. Evidence was challenged, investigative missteps were exposed, and the charges were dropped. Legally, no one was found responsible, yet suspicion lingered, a shadow that refused to lift.
Months later, a darker picture emerged. Digital communications painted Suzanne as a woman feeling trapped and watched, someone who may have confided her fears to others, expressing a desire for freedom from emotional confinement. She may have been planning to change her life, yet her communications abruptly ceased. No farewell, no sign of departure, only a silence that cut mid-thought, mid-action, mid-life. It was as if her story had been paused indefinitely in a moment no one could access or understand. The road near her home remained unchanged. The mountains continued to rise silently in the distance. Cars passed occasionally, unaware of the mystery that had unfolded. Yet whatever had happened that Mother's Day was not erased. It lingered in the forested embankments, the soft dirt, and the bike left behind. It existed in the tension between evidence and assumption, between what could be proven and what felt hauntingly true. Today, Suzanne Morphew remains missing. No remains have been found. No final answers exist. The case lives in a liminal space between suspicion and proof, between what can be legally established and what is emotionally understood. Was the bike scene staged? Did Suzanne attempt to leave and fail? Or did something more sinister, more unexplainable unfold in those hours when no one was watching? Every detail, the abandoned bike, the untouched helmet, the abrupt cessation of communications, creates a pattern that resists clarity. It is a case that continues to haunt investigators, friends, neighbors, and anyone who tries to make sense of it. The mountains stand unchanged, the roads remain open, and the quiet hum of life carries on as if the events of that day never occurred. And yet, for those who remember, the silence is deafening, a quiet that presses on the mind, filling it with questions that remain unanswered. The story of Suzanne Morphew is not simply one of disappearance. It is a story of absence, of unfinished lives, and of the uncanny spaces where ordinary routines meet extraordinary mystery. What happened on that Mother's Day? Was it an accident, a calculated disappearance, or something else entirely, hidden in the folds of ordinary life until it slipped through the cracks? No one knows, and perhaps that is the most disturbing part of all, that a life so familiar, so seemingly complete, can vanish entirely, leaving only fragments, questions, and the lingering presence of something that refuses to be understood. The mountains, the road, the bike, they are all still there, waiting, watching, silent witnesses to an event that defies comprehension. And somewhere, in the spaces between assumption and reality, the truth of Suzanne Morphew's fate continues to exist, unseen, unresolved, and hauntingly incomplete.
Suzanne vanished without a trace. No answers, no justice, only silence. Subscribe now, because some crimes don't end, they wait.